on behalf of the entire team of Computer Society of India. I am Deep Patel, President of CSIDDU.
And I am Janki Vagasia, Head of Event Management at CSIDDU. We welcome all of you to today's session. Before we start with the session, ensure that you have a good internet connection. Also, if you have any questions during the session, please type them in the chat section. We will have time for them at the end. I would request all of you to maintain silence and decorum throughout the session. Any kind of unwanted nuisance will lead to consequences. And if you face any voice lag, then do let us know in the chat section. So, without taking much of your time, let us begin. I hope all of you are as excited as me. In this plot, we will be hosting events every weekend and invite personalities who have achieved something extraordinary from once being at the same stage as all of us are right now. In this third episode of Achievers on the Line series, we have with us Udit Gami sir, who is currently working as program manager at Facebook and is also a public speaker. He is a CE graduate from DDU itself and has also completed his masters in computer science from University of Michigan. So, Udit sir, we are really fortunate to have you at our event. We all are super excited to know about your 4 years journey in DDU. It would be great if you could tell us all about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that summarizes my 4 year journey is experience and confidence, right? So in CSI, when I started my journey in DDIT, was maybe way smaller than where you have taken, guys. So congratulations on kind of making CSI such an integral part of the college experience. But yeah, I think one thing that I have learned through my journey in DDU is how to build confidence, and I think that was essential when you go out in the real world, and how you can leverage that confidence to be on your side when you're kind of talking with other people, competing against other people, and kind of paving your own career, right? So that's number one. Number two, I think the other thing is, like, because we have such a rigorous system, whether it's internals, externals, like meeting that cutoff score so that you do not get into REM cycle. What is very interesting is that it always constantly pushes you. So no matter how much you hate it right now, you realize that you have developed that inbuilt quality of like always pushing yourself and maybe going that extra mile to make sure that you do the best in whatever you're doing. So I think that was second quality I think I can attribute to my journey here in DDIT. And last but the most important thing is the people and the friends you make, right? Like I'm on the panel, but I can guarantee that it's not just me. There are so many people in my batch and even my seniors and my juniors who have done incredibly well. People are employed to one of the finest companies. A lot of people have built and started their own company. I know a colleague of mine who has his own company and is running his operations from Singapore. There are a lot of people who have gone beyond engineering and like have their own entrepreneurial businesses which are not in IT at all, right? A friend of mine who's in Surat has her own sari shop, and like she has made it amazingly online driven, and that's incredible. So I think but the fact that I was coming to is like you meet all these people in your journey throughout the 4 years, and you never know like who will become what in next 10 or 15 years. So I would kind of attribute relationship building and the friends and the company that I've had in these 4 years to be a definitive highlight of my career. And it is, talking with these people, staying in connection with these people that kind of keeps you motivated and grounded. And I think, no matter how much hard you study, like make sure you always take out some time for some fun, meet your friends and do some great things and make great memories, because I think that will carry forward and that will build the relation as you grow your careers. Hopefully that answers your question, but I'm happy to take anything else that you have on.
Yes.
It was a really inspiring journey, sir. Sir, you also did your master's from one of the top universities of the world, that is the University of Michigan. So we are eager to know about your master's journey as well.
Yeah, so I think just a little correction. I did my undergrad, basically my bachelor's in electronics and communication. So I was in the EC department, but I was very closely working with Siddharth sir and everybody in the computer science department, because as I said, I was very interested in it, and I was looking for building my foundations in computer science a little bit more, which is why I did my master's, which is why I came to United States for a master's. And it doesn't matter, to be honest, like where you do your master's from, right? Whether it's India, whether it's US, whether you do through Gate, or whether it's like GRE or a GMAT that you give. I think what worked out for me in my master's journey was ensuring that I have a financial stability. So interestingly, during the same time, I was also working for IBM, and I was able to like fund my college and my master's degree while working. So that kind of worked out in my favor, and that made sure that I'm set up on the right path. I think the second interesting thing was very that was very unique in the master's journey was the sense of accountability, I guess. In college, I think like in DDIT, like you always have your friends. You always have you can always go to your friend and say, okay, can I just copy your journal? Like, can I just get that data and make sure that things work out well? Whether it's like an experiment, right? Because everybody, like even I was in the same situation where we were like sitting on the center for like copying journals from one another and getting it before submission ready. So I think like that completely changed for us in masters. Like there was a big no on plagiarism, right? So you cannot copy any single thing, and you would actually like lose a lot of credit for it. So that was one thing where people started doing their own thing, and that kind of instilled a sense of accountability. And I think the third critical thing on on my master's journey was networking, which I think will probably come down later as well. But one thing that I've realized is that for your career growth, it is very important to meet the right set of people, and it is also a bit of luck, right, to be at the right place at the right time. But it is important to be open. And like while I did not have a problem, I know a lot of us could be a situation like, how do you go to an unknown person and say, hi, I'm Udit and this is what I do, right? It becomes a little awkward, but back here in US, a lot of people actually do that really well. And that is why it is important for us to ensure that we build on that skill. We get comfortable with that uncomfortable part of just randomly going to a stranger and talking about yourself. But it becomes even more critical to understand why it is essential and how it helps. And the last thing that I would want to say is like often, right? Like I grew up asking not for help, right? I wanted to do everything that I could in my own skill set. Like, okay, I don't need to ask people for help, but I realized that it's okay to ask for help. And when you're asking for help, also do yourself a favor. And when someone asks you for help, go above and beyond and help that person, because it is like a mutually symbiotic relationship where you can grow faster and better if you help one another. So I think like I've worked with a lot of my friends to like review their resumes, or just like do a mock interview or give them tips on what could be the right set of preparation for an interview. So I think that really helps in kind of helps you grow faster and collectively as a group. So four things basically, right? Make sure that you have financial stability, and I think that worked really wonders for me. Like make sure that you have sense of accountability. Build on that skill of networking, and most importantly, like help one another. And it's okay to ask for help. So those were like one of the few of the lessons basically that kind of helped me move forward in my career, which I kind of learned during my master's journey.
Okay, that was indeed an insightful answer, sir. Thank you for walking us through your amazing journey. So, are there any educational and cultural differences you faced during studying abroad versus in India?
Yeah. So I think like one thing that is distinctively like different is like we have. So it was very nice that we had open book exam. And it was like a very new concept for me. It's like, okay, wow, this is amazing, right? Like that means that I don't have to like cram anything. I don't have to memorize anything. But then you often realize that the questions are such that you literally have to know the concept to actually do a good job in answering that question. No matter like you might have the whole book open in front of you. You might have all the details, but you'll not be able to kind of pick up the answers if you don't know the concept. The other thing that was also kind of interesting was like we had another course where I was allowed to take one sheet of paper with me. So I like scribbled every little detail on like tiny piece of paper and all the formulas so that everything in my book, all the important details were right there on that piece of paper. But I realized during the exam that I used very little of that paper, probably because like the way questions were asked. So I think what I'm coming down to is that I think like the approach to examination is very different, right? I cannot imagine what would happen if DDIT decides that we're going to have open book exam, but that was something that was definitely a big change. I think the second thing that is very different is um, just the kind of lot of times we realize that in DDIT, like when I was doing my undergrad. Uh, I had we use a lot of same set of thinking, whether it is to problem solving or whether it's to a difficult situation, right? Most of us, because we are like from Gujarat, most of us have like same way of approaching a solution. But that completely changed when you're doing masters, right? So I had a lot of internal projects where I had to work with different sets of people, and most of them were non-Indians. So that gives you like understanding of what it is to think from another person's perspective, which has completely different background, which come from a completely different origin. So that kind of really helps you kind of understand the opposite perspective and like different set of ideas, and that really helped me kind of grow in my thinking pattern. So what I would also encourage you, if and I think it's a global world right now, it's way better than what it was when I was studying in India, right? So I would highly encourage you to probably connect with more people on online communities, maybe Grubhub, like maybe anything like GitHub, sorry, or anything like, I don't know if you guys know, medium.com is like another good space where you can write stuff, you can read good stuff, which are technically driven. So I would highly encourage you to talk to people at least beyond Gujarat, and kind of understand uh, what is going on in the other side of the world as well, which will give you great perspective. I think the other, maybe a cultural change, was the fact that uh, uh, I realized that not knowing something is not bad, right? Oftentimes, like we generalize that if you don't know something, that means it's your fault. It's something that you need to kind of learn more or do more effort. But what I realized is that not learning is probably a big sign for knowing where you should focus, right? So if I don't know how to say code in Python, then that is something that I really need to know, instead of like putting myself down that, oh shit, I don't know and everybody else knows. So I think that was like a big change, like in the way of thinking, I guess, which kind of was a good experience, a cultural change, and it wasn't taken badly or looked or frowned upon.
Yes, sir, that was really very interesting to know, sir. Also, most of the undergrads who are opting for masters are skeptical, means about choosing whether to gain an experience and do a master's or directly opt for a master's. So, what is your opinion on that?
So I think it depends on whether you know what you want to do or not, what you want to do like with your career, right? So for me, like I did my internship, and then I also did 1 year, 1.5 year in Sybase software, which I was in the Gandhinagar branch here in Gujarat, and then I kind of moved for masters. But I know like a lot of my friends who were with me, my close friends, they went directly to US for masters, and it, it to be honest, like I don't think it helps or doesn't help, right? Because a lot of your Indian experience, unless until you have been in India for like 5 years or 6 years and then gone for masters, which not a lot of people do. Most of the people go to masters like after like 1 or 2 years or maximum 3 years of experience. So most of that Indian experience that you have gets very shrinked when you look at the overall spectrum, and then you graduated and then you are applying for jobs, right? So it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't necessarily matter. But yes, working in India and then kind of comparing that to your work in US will definitely help you gain that different perspective. And for me, it was different. And I think I learned a lot just from working in India. And I think that is something that would serve to your advantage. Also, like because a lot of Indian companies, at least the ones that come to our campus when I was working, when I was studying, sorry, were consulting companies like TCS or like the one that I got employed to, like Sybase, right? So we would have like an offshore or an onshore kind of model. So we had clients in US at least when I was in Sybase. So that would help you kind of connect with the clients also uh, more more easily, and then you would be able to know when you go to US for your masters that what it is to be on the other side. Right now you are in US and you're talking to your other counterparts in India, so you will be able to empathize and you'll be able to relate to them more if you've kind of worked in the Indian IT company before. So it's some advantage, but in the longer run I don't think it makes a lot of difference. As long as you know what you want to do, I think that's cool enough.
Yes, I agree with you, sir. Also, generally, people have believed that MBA is required for a managerial position in any firm, but you excelled your career in managerial position without an MBA, which is really an applausible thing. So, how did you achieve that?
Yeah, so I think that's a misconception. Like, you don't need an MBA for a manager. I think the concept about managerial roles is different. Um, in a lot of companies here, at least in US, the scope. So a lot of people also don't look at managerial position as a promotion. Think of this as two tracks, right? Like the first track is the technical track where you code, you solve problems, and you build solutions that can help the business move forward, right? So you're amazing at that technical vertical. And then there is another vertical which is managerial. Now if both of those are like parallel tracks of train, right? The job While the job of the technical vertical is to build amazing code and roll out these systems that can solve complex problems, the role of the managerial track is to support this technical vertical. Doesn't make them superior, doesn't make them a position of power. What the original core responsibilities of the manager is to ensure that if the technical track is doing well, then they are doing their job well. So at least in Facebook and some of the other companies that I've worked in, managers are not the positions of power. A lot of that comes down from what kind of culture do you have in your company, right? Whether it's a top-down culture or a bottom-up culture. So a bottom-up culture is where employees or basically engineers decide what would be the direction of the company, and whether there is a particular thing that you want to do it uh, in a particular way. That's bottoms up, right? Like top down is where a manager says, okay, this is what I want, this is by when I want, and this is why I want you to do it, right? So that is, some companies have that, but most of the companies, at least that I have worked on, have had the opposite. So that's why managers are not looked as the positions of power, or someone who gets promoted. Um, the other aspect of an MBA is, and again, I haven't done an MBA, so I'm not maybe the most educated person on that topic. But I think from what I understand is it gives you lessons on business, right? And you being a manager could be a technical manager or an engineering manager, right? So it has nothing to do with what an MBA would teach you, because it's going to teach you how to do your marketing, your sales, your operations, your international affairs, and all the other finance or things like that in a very great manner. And here you could be an engineering manager who has no relevance for an MBA. So I would highly encourage people to kind of, again, look, not just do an MBA because you want to become a manager, but because you feel that you can help people. Uh, People is at core of your work. You like talking to people. If you're not like a social person, you can still be a manager. You can still be a great manager, but you need to have that quality, or you need to have that mindset that, okay, if the Janki kind of does really well and they are my direct reports, then I'm happy. So basically, seeking happiness in other, or your direct reports happiness, if that's something that excites you, then that is something that you should consider to get into as a manager.
That was really very impressive, sir. So, how can a person develop his leadership and management skills?
Yeah, so I think I would say, like, something that I was told, right, by my manager, is that if you can excel at influencing without power, then that is a true sense of leadership. When I say influence without power, is like a lot of times what happens to us is that if, say, hypothetically, you are my manager, right? And then you come and tell me like, hey, Uday, do this for me, and then I'll listen to you, right? Because obviously you're my manager. I don't want to disappoint you. I want good money at the end of the day, right? But if you're not my manager and you come and tell me that, hey, Udit, I need your help with this. Can you help me with it? Right? And I still do that for you, in spite of you just being like a colleague to me, or maybe like a cross-functional team or another team member for me, and I still do that for you. Then that is leadership, because you're exerting influence. You have built that relationship uh, with me to ensure that I can help you, and I can bank, like, I can trust you enough to help me when I need it, right? So I think my first take on leadership is ensuring how, or not ensuring, but like making sure that you can influence positively without having that power or position of power, and that is critical to your success. I think the second sense of leadership is committing, right? So where I feel like a lot of times it is assumed that a leader is one who directs but doesn't follow through. But I have learned that if you want other people to follow, I think then you should do it. And to give you like an example, uh, like recently, right? While I was recently while I'm at Facebook, we do like a monthly review of what our KPIs are. KPIs are key performance indicators, right? Which means like if you're doing a project, some of the key performance indicators could be like an SLA, which is like if you are expected to do a certain task in like 4 hours, are you doing it in 4 hours or not, right? So like a lot of these KPIs or key performance indicators were things that we had to report to our higher manager, like our VP. So like I could tell somebody to do that for me, and then that would be one thing. But to ensure that we build those KPIs right way, to make sure that we monitor those and we track those and we have the right analytics to ensure that we can identify trends, it was something that I had to get my hands dirty and tell the team that, okay, this is how we need to do it, this is why we need to do it, and this is, let me give you an example of doing it. And then I constantly kept doing it for 3 weeks before I had, someone else kind of help me out with it. And that showed the importance of it, rather than me just telling it like, okay, this is what I want, let's do it, right? So I would say committing is very critical, especially it also helps you kind of gain some credibility with the team, and that is critical for ensuring your leadership. And I think the other thing, like I think, which was a good learning for me as well, was that the aspect on diversity. A lot of times we don't realize how much biases we have in our head, and this is a foreign concept. Trust me, like I didn't know about this till very recently, right? And so a lot of you guys might feel, what is this bias and what does this mean? It's probably like around like, okay, is around like how we think like about a certain set of people, whether it's because they are a girl or a guy, or it's because they are an Indian or a non-Indian. It's like some implicit things that go into our head while maybe hiring somebody, or while interviewing somebody, or whether it is also like even talking to somebody, right? So just because they are a women, or they are an Indian, or they are of a certain color, doesn't make them that. And that is something that I learned. And as a leader, it is very, very critical to ensure that you think of these diverse opinions, you think of these diverse people, and kind of ensure that they are part of your team in a manner that they feel welcome and warm. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're not going to get their ideas and their perspectives, which are essential for you to move forward. So I would highly, that was another thing that I kind of learned very recently, but I thought it would be a great share.
Yes, it is true, sir, that leaders become great not just by their power but their ability to inspire others. And as you emphasized about networking earlier, I remember a quote which says, network is the net worth. So, how can we initiate and expand our connections?
That's a great question. I think there's no right or wrong answer to it, right? Like what works for me might not work for you, and might not work for the or anyone else, right? Here. But I think like the answer to that question is very personal right now for me, so I'll leverage that. One thing is to understand that like if you're helping out somebody, or rather if somebody's helping out to you, it becomes like a moral obligation to help someone else, right? And I think if you don't do that, then you consciously and somehow, like it is something that you cannot control. Like inside you will feel like, okay, I'm being very selfish while just going and asking somebody for help when I need it. Otherwise I don't care about that person, right? So consciously you'll feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do it. But if you know that you're helping other people, right? If you know that if somebody comes to you and you're helping them, then you are at least morally clear or consciously clear that, okay, I'm helping somebody else, it's okay for me to seek help from somebody else. So I think just having that clear conscious really helps, because you're always a good person helping people. I think second thing is to understand that it is okay that you're not perfect. Like nobody's perfect. So even if you craft like a crappy email, which is like an introduction, it's okay. Right? That is you right now, but you'll not be that same person in the next 5 years, and I think most of the people understand that. So I would say that don't be too harsh on yourself, where you rethink and rethink and rethink like million times. Yes, certain rethinking is essential. I'm not saying that you should be spontaneous, but I would also encourage you not to lose your true authentic self in like rethinking so much that you just do not reach out to that person at all, right? So I think that is something that I would highly encourage you guys to focus on. And I think the third thing is just being confident, like, and I think that is probably the most important and the most critical thing, that if you know what are your strengths, right? Like I know that this is my strength and this is what I do good at, and this is my weakness, and that is what I know. So even when I was in college and when I was growing up, we have always been told that, okay, if this is your weakness, then you need to improve your weakness, right? Like you've also been told, okay, you're not good at public speaking, get better at public speaking. You're not good at C, get better at C. But I think we often forget to focus on strengths. So I believe like if we focus more on strengths, like say public speaking is my strength, and if I keep focusing on that and getting better at it, then a lot of times it's okay for me to have some weakness, because that's just human. So I think like you should focus on strength, be confident about that strength, and then take that confidence with you when you talk to people, because that very clearly shows, right? And it very clearly calls out that, okay, Janki is passionate about, say, baking, hypothetically, right? And now she's asking a super amazing blogger or influencer about a recipe which she wants to publish on her own blog. So I think just taking that confidence is very, very essential. And I think one other thing that I would add to that is some aspect of passion and your own interest. So like networking takes time, right? Sometimes if you go to a person, they might not have time, they might not be in the mental space to even revert back to you. So you might not get a response. So you might have to do that cold calling for some time, reach out, and kind of make that conscious effort to know how you're also helping and adding value to that person. So if I'm referring you to say Facebook, right? Then how does that help me? Right? How does that make me like, oh, I referred this amazing person to Facebook and help my team grow, right? So I think it is essential to kind of also kind of highlight and be consistent, and not kind of give up if somebody does not respond to you immediately, or does not respond to you right away.
Yes,
Uh,
but while we try to be authentic, sometimes we might be too kind, or sometimes we might seem too arrogant. So, like, how to maintain the professionalism? What would be the boundary of it? Are there any do's and don'ts for that?
Yeah, so I think like the don'ts are very clear, right? Like as a person, if you feel that this is getting to a territory where it's uncomfortable, and it is different for everybody, right? What my tolerance to uncomfortableness is different for me as compared to say you, Janki, or Deep, right? So I think that's when you move away, right? So I think that is something that each one of us has to decide. Second thing, don't get, I think the basic clue to professionalism is not to get too personal. I don't want to know whether you're married or not. I don't want to know where you live. I don't want to know if you have kids or not. Like what I want to know is, how we can work together or how we can partner together to kind of help our respective careers, right? So kind of getting straight to the point is also another thing where you say hello, how are you doing, blah blah blah, and then kind of get to the point, right? Because everybody does not have time, and you want to make sure that you're optimizing for both of your time. So being that it's okay to be direct. I'm not saying arrogant, but direct in a manner that that is courteous enough. So maybe using the words like kind or please, or just the fact that I appreciate your time. Appreciate is another great word, which I think a lot of us, I didn't use when I was back in India. Now I use so often. So or looking forward to hearing from you or something like that, which kind of expresses some genuine gratitude to that person for his or her time, and also making sure that it's professional enough that you're not getting too personal with that person. The other thing I would say, like, so say I know one of your friends, Deep, and then I'm leveraging that friend to kind of build a connection on you. So if that's the situation, then it becomes even more essential for you to maintain the respect or the dignity or the boundary of that friend, right? So because he or she is introducing you to the another person. So I think just ensuring that as well is probably very essential.
That was really very insightful, sir. But even after making connection and a good network, so people often hesitate to ask for a referral. So can you share some tips on how to approach someone at a first and any do's and don't during the first conversation?
Yeah. So I think like first, one thing that I have had several people reach out to me for referrals as well. I think one thing I would highly encourage people to do is find the positions that you are interested in that company. Just don't go ahead and say, "Hi, can you refer me to your company?" I mean, it doesn't do any good to me, right? So take that effort, take the first step of finding what are the positions that work for you, and then go ahead and message. So always have that handy. Second, um, this is something that I haven't seen a lot of people have, but I would highly encourage you to do so. Like a quick blurb or a quick summary of why you are a good fit, right? In the end, you always want to sell yourself to an extent that you are the best person in that position. So you have to write very briefly, like in 5 lines or in 3 lines, like why is Deep or why is Janki the best person in this? Like, and it doesn't have to be like showing that, oh, I'm great. It's about the fact that this is what the position requires and this is what I have done and that's why I'm a good fit, right? So very clearly calling that out is very important. And when you reach out to this person for a referral, you can say, hey, I looked at your career website and I know you are in this company from so and so time. I saw this position and I was really interested in it. Would you be kind enough to refer me? If that person says yes, then you can say, thank you so much. And this is why I think I'll be great fit for this position. And I would really, again, appreciate your help for referring me. So, again, if you look at this, it's like a two-step approach, right? First, you're asking the permission and saying that you've already done your homework, you already know which position to apply for. And then once that person says yes, you're strengthening your case by saying, this is why I think I'm a good fit for this position, right? So just making sure that um, and again, there are so many people who work. So I'm not the only person who works for Facebook, right? We have so many people from DBIT who might be working in Facebook. So if hypothetically you reach out to me and I don't respond, it's okay. You reach out to some other person, right? And that's where I think the other thing is that the other thing that kind of helped me is looking at this in 5 years down the line. So right now, if I reach out to somebody who is at my age and my level, then the probability of they hiring and uh, they hiring in their team and kind of recruiting me is lower, right? But if I build connections with somebody who's like 5 years or 7 years elder, right? I know he's probably or she's probably going to be a manager or is going to be in a position where they could hire me, and I have because I have this relationship or this connection, it would be easier for me to kind of sell myself. So always look at somebody who is probably higher in their career journey to connect, because that will give you perspective or more direction, and also you'll be able to kind of have that bond when they hire. You'll be able to reach them easily. Hopefully that helps though.
Yes. But now that we have clear idea of how to approach for someone, like is it necessary to send them the resume while asking for the referral?
No, I think not necessarily. You should probably the first step should just be like can you do this for me? And then most of the times they'll say yes, and I need this and this. So if they don't need your resume, you probably don't have to send them, because the more, like, sometimes we often send like all the details at once, right? But that gets too overwhelming. So it might be better to just like ask what they need, and maybe you could add a line saying that I have my resume ready. If you need that for your reference, I would be happy to share it with you, or something like that. And that would really kind of give them a perspective as well, that you're ready for this role, and you're fully prepared.
Okay. And in case if they say yes to send the resume, like what are the things included in strong resume? Like are there any keywords which an institute searches for
Yeah.
particular position?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think resume depends a lot, or differs a lot based uh, on the country, right? So the way we create resume in India is very different than how the resume is created in US. So I mean, like, I'm not going to like I'm not talking. I think it might not be right thing to talk about the differences, but something such as foundational things that could really help all of you here listening to me today. So I think one thing that would help is, okay, I think is understanding that the purpose of resume is to get you an interview, right? So how would you get an interview, and when you get an interview, how would you excel that? So I'm going to talk about that first, and then kind of revert back to the resume thing. So, like, it is important to kind of hold the control of your interview, and you can hold the control of the interview through your resume. And I think that is essential and that is powerful, because that will help you get the job. So let me give you a specific example, right? So if you write in your resume that I led uh, automation of my regression test suite to ensure automation coverage of 96% manual test cases. Right? Imagine this is your first line, right? So now say let's do a little role play, right? Let's assume that you are my interviewer, right? And I'm a person who's interviewing for you. Right? You read that first line. What would be your first question for me? Right? Most of the cases it would be like, oh wow, you did this where you automated 90% of your manual test cases. How did you do it? And now, because you're anticipating that question, you already have an answer prepared for it, right? So this is how you're ensuring that you have control of the interview that would happen. So your resume should always reflect, or at least the first few lines should always reflect uh, on like what you want the interviewer to ask you. And that is why it is essential to have certain amount of data driven, or certain amount of data in it, whether it's like a revenue growth that you hit, whether it is a percentage of manual tests you automated, or whether it is a lines of code that you wrote, right? So you want to plug in some number, because that number will pop up and they'll ask you a question on it and you already know an answer to it. So make sure that you have that very clearly called out in your resume. I think the second thing I would want to highlight is not to keep your resume generic. That was a mistake that I made, and I think I've learned very correctly that that is not something that's scalable. So, say you're applying for TCS, and then you're applying for, say, Sybase, and then you're applying for Infosys. A lot of times, like for people graduating out of the college, the job descriptions are same, but what is different is what the company values more. So what Sybase values more could be, that role could be specific to QA. So you want to kind of probably tailor your resume to some of the QA certifications you have done, or some of the QA online courses you have done, so that they find it more relevant. Or maybe when you are in the TCS, interviewing for TCS, you are probably interviewing for a BA role. So you want to talk about those skills which show that you have the ability to talk, you have the ability to do requirement gathering, right? You have the ability to connect with people and get information out of them. So if you just keep one standard resume and apply for both QA role and BA role, or rather both for Sybase and TCS, then it's not going to be very helpful for you. So ensure you tailor your resume to the needs of the job requirement. And I think the third key thing that I wanted to kind of highlight is ensuring there is uniformity, right? Because a lot of times we use small fonts or we use big fonts and we try to get fancy, but the scope of resume is not to get fancy. The scope of resume is to ensure you give them like a brief, um, I would say, like a sneak peek, or like just like excite them enough to kind of hire you for an interview round, right? Or to get you to an interview round, not a hire, but because I think if you get too much details, if you make it super long, then it will become boring and people will not look at it. And in the end, like people or recruiters just spend like 5 to 10 seconds maybe like looking at the resume. So it makes sense to keep it short, crisp, and data driven. So add that data value as well. Please don't forget that.
Also, sir, after having a strong resume ready, what should be an ideal interview preparation strategy for a recent undergraduate who is applying for a managerial position in an organization? And also, sir, can you emphasize on how are the managerial role interviews different from those of the technical interviews?
Yeah. So I think so your interview like your interview strategy depends on the company, right? Most of the companies have a fixed set of rules, or basically a fixed set of process which they take, or it's even fixed set of questions. So say let's take a generic strategy. I think one thing is uh, you need to have certain examples, right? Most of the leadership questions would be like, okay, tell me about a time where you resolved a conflict, right? Or tell me about a time where you had a difficult problem to solve and you brought consensus and influence together to solve a problem, right? So what I would recommend is like you can predict these questions. They're like all over the internet, and I would use those questions to kind of come up with stories and be prepared, right? So when they ask you, then you have like 10 stories or 10 examples of where you demonstrated a certain quality, and you can plug and play, and you can like use those stories for some of the interview questions, right? So keep those stories handy. Then the second question becomes like, how do you narrate those stories? So there is a technique called the star technique, where you talk about the situation, right? So this was a problem, right? This is why I was brought in, right? This is what I did, and this was the result, right? So like structuring your answers, whether it is any question, right? It is essential that you structure it well, because even when you're interviewing, it could be a possibility that your interviewer is thinking something else, whether it's about food or whether he wants to go home early, or his kid or something like that, but you want to grab his or her attention like all the time. So the easiest way to do so is by structuring your answers, so even if he or she loses the context on some aspect, he can still benefit, or she can still benefit by listening on the last part of it. So I think just ensuring that while you're preparing for interview, not only keep the stories handy, but also ensure the structure of the interview to be correct enough so that it doesn't become a blocker. I think the third differentiator though between managerial and technical interviews is like technical is pretty straightforward. It's a coding interview, right? Most of the time, and or it's an architecture or system design interview where they say, okay, I want you to design like a distributed system which is hosted on cloud, which does this, and it becomes easy for you to design, or it becomes like a problem that you have to solve to design this. For most of the managerial interviews are behavioral interviews where they're gonna ask you a situation and judge or try to gauge how your behavior would be on a certain situation, so that they can understand like how are you as a leader, right? The other difference is also the perspective on questions that are asked. Most of these questions are like, how can you help people grow, right? Your ultimate goal is to have that growth plan for people who are reporting you, and you it's a job like a mother, right? Like your job as a mother or a parent is that all your children at the end of the day would grow out of your home and do wonders in the world, and it is your job as a parent to make that happen. Similarly, as a manager, it is your job that your team succeeds, your team does well, the people reporting to you do well, right? You have the right direction, you coach them well. So the questions are tailored that way. They want to see your attitude that way. And the last thing that differentiates the most is the cultural fit. Like a lot of time, some people are very direct, right? Some people are maybe very political. So they, in the end, like they want to see like, are you a good cultural fit for this role or not? Because the entire, so say if I'm a manager and if I'm not a good cultural fit, the entire experience for like 50 people under me would be bad, right? So they want to ensure that this person is the right fit to the org, and we have the right set of people. I just have to take a quick pause because my battery is going out. Do you mind giving me like 2 minutes? I'll be right back.
Yes, sir.
Sure, sir.
Sorry, just a second. All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm sorry for that. I just had to make sure that my laptop doesn't power off.
That's fine. So you were talking about interview strategy.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that that is what I wanted to kind of say. Like, make sure that you as I said, prepare your stories well in advance, right? Make sure you're structuring them, and then the difference between the manager and the technical round is like a lot of behavioral questions, maybe like on how you react to a particular situation, and then the goal of that interview is to ensure that you can grow your team and support your team. So there's also a factor of the person being the right cultural fit for the org. So yeah, I think that's a delta. While most of the technical interviews are focused on coding, ensuring that you can problem solve together, or you can problem solve well, and also you can problem solve more effectively. So your time like basically, I think the other aspect of technical interview is also to make sure that you have not the right solution, which is great. You need to have the right solution, but also whether you're able to take the instructions well. So a lot of time during the coding interview, right? While you're coding like online, the person who is taking interview will point you to a direction that, okay, I don't want you to use this variable. Basically, I don't want you to use this algorithm. Instead of stack, let's use say heap like hash map or something like that. And are you able to pivot like really well? That becomes also a good way to gauge your ability as a technical expert, right? But as a manager, again, it is about pivoting on different situations, right? So whether you're managing a team which has like high conflict, or you're managing a team who has like a tight deadline and you're not able to commit, how would you react? So it's that delta which I think is key, especially when you're preparing for managerial interviews. If you have like more specific question, I can definitely go deep into it.
No, I guess this would completely make us completely interview ready. But once we start applying for an interview, we might face some rejections at some point of time. So,
Yeah.
like, how can one handle those situations to get most out of that adversity?
Yeah, I think rejections are hard because, like, yeah, they're hard. There's no questions asked, right? Like, not everybody gets their dream job. Not everybody gets the job they want in the first go. So I think it's like when you have rejections, when the person say we like it's like any other rejection, I believe. But what is essential, I think, is not to kind of give up, right? And I like when I was first looking for my first job in here in US, right? One there are a lot of reasons why you have a rejection. Like, first thing is I I had still not completed my degree, right? As I said, I was working in IBM in consulting, but then and I was still doing my masters. So a lot of companies, which is crazy when you kind of look at it, but a lot of feedback that I got was like, you do not have a US degree, and because you do not have a US degree, getting your job in US was very difficult because they don't know whether DDIT is even a legitimate college or not. So it was like, if you think of it, it's like, what the hell is happening, right? So that's something you cannot control, right? A lot of times people have rejection because of visa issues, right? Because they do not have an ability to sponsor you. So that's also something you can't control. I think what you can control is the amount of preparation that goes into the interview, and I think that is in your hands. So what you can only do from a rejection is learn where you could have prepared better. At least you'll get set of questions that were asked to you and you knew and you didn't know. So maybe like even take a mental note of what those questions were. So when they get asked again, like maybe in another interview, then I think you can answer them well. So I think that is essential. And I think one other thing that could work well, especially when you have rejections, is like making sure that you do not put all your balls in one basket, or like don't put all your chickens in one basket, right? Because I think like if you just apply for one job and you're like, I want this job, then the probability of you being disappointed is going to be super high as compared to like making sure that you apply for like 10 companies and then you get rejection in one. You at least know mentally that okay, there are 9 others, right? Or at least you know that I have to prepare really hard for 5 others because I've already got rejected 5. So like making sure that you have that diversity and you constantly keep applying for roles is key, I believe.
That was really very insightful, sir. And now I really wanted to hone in how is working in a big MNC like Facebook is different from other firms.
Yeah, so I think like what's different for Facebook is I think most important thing is culture, right? So I think each company has its own values, and for Facebook, uh, they're okay if you like create or like launch a production defect and that kind of brings the entire server down. What's not okay is that you're not moving fast, right? So because like we are in a space where a lot of things happen or change very rapidly, like the way like a lot of you use social media is way different than how we use social media. And like when I was in college, right, we used to still have Orkut. I don't know if most of the people here even know what Orkut is, right? So I think things move really fast, and that's why uh, one of the core values for Facebook is to move fast and be bold, right? So that is a big part of the culture where we have people kind of coding maybe even all night to kind of launch a particular feature, and then not come to work the next morning. So it is kind of flexible that way, to just kind of give you the best the best experience that you want and do the work that you want in your way. I think the other but this is not again true for every company, right? It's just specifically talking about Facebook here. I think the other thing is that they give you like so you'll be very I don't know if you'll be like surprised, but at least I was surprised that Facebook does not follow like very core software development methodologies, whether it's waterfall or agile. Most of our work, not every team in Facebook does actually. Maybe I should clarify. A lot of our work is project driven, right? Say like basically how we do in college, right? You have a semester, you have a project, and then it's up to you to when and how you want to build that project, scope that project out, and like deliver that project. So if you are true to DITN, then or DDU, and I don't know what do we call right now these days, but we used to call DITNs when I was in college, and then you could wait for the entire few months and then do the entire project in last 2 months and get it delivered, and that's okay too, as long as you do it well, because that gets reflected on your performance. So that was surprising for me, like because all my previous company were very agile focused, or very agile focused. So I think that was a big change. I think the other aspect is, as I talked about, like heavy focus on being bottoms up. So here the manager's job is to ensure that they talk with the people, they talk with their teams to kind of bring ideas which can then be implemented, and it has to come from the employees rather than like a VP or director telling that I want you to do this, I want you to do that. So I think that was like a big cultural change, which I think is really fun to work with, because you get more power in your hands, and then you know that if you propose an idea, people will listen to it. So yeah.
Also, sir, we have heard about the hack culture in Facebook. Like there are some internal hackathons. What organized by Facebook for its employees. So can you share your experience on that?
Yeah, I had an amazing experience where so hackathons are, as I said, ways that Facebook encourages employees to go beyond their normal work, right? So most of us can code, right? But we don't get to do that in day-to-day life. So it is like a 3 day work, like because of COVID now, like it's all virtual. But back in the day when there was no COVID, we used to have like all the people like in one room in our offices, and like, of course like a big huge conference room if you can imagine. And then people would just spend like entire day and night for those 3 days working on a project and an MVP. Right, MVP is minimal viable product, which is like a product which is not completely baked, which is not completely made, but enough for you to ship to the customers, right? So you want to you want to make sure that that much features are there. So the most rewarding part is like we used to have like even Mark Zuckerberg come in and kind of judge the competition or kind of decide on what should go out, because that in the end like it's very rewarding when you see that you spend 3 days, you made this amazing product, and now people use it, right? So I think that was very encouraging. And um, like one thing that I personally learned was the design skills, right? Like I have never worked on UI mocks and creating like a mock basically, which could be then a wireframe basically, which could be then translated into like a UX design and a UX screen. So when I was hacking for one of the projects, I learned like a tool called Figma. Figma is like a great tool to create this UI designs and mockups, and I just learned it, and it was I would have never learned it if I was not doing a hackathon, because I wouldn't have got time. But I was able to leverage that, and that was really nice. So yeah, it's a great way of bringing people together and kind of focusing on innovation and driving that.
It was wonderful to hear about fun culture of Facebook, sir. But now the most awaited question of the audience was, how is a day in a life of a program manager at Facebook?
Yeah, it's busy. A lot of meetings. You get to a point where you are spending your day in meetings, and then you realize that you don't have time for work. But again, I think most of my focus areas, like there are four focus areas, I would say, right? Like one is so just to give you some, like all of you, some context, right? So there are three parts the way I see it, right? For any software company, one is the product org, right, which kind of decides, okay, this is my product vision, this is what I want to build, right? Like somebody who's directing what kind of business segment they want to target, how the revenue would come from this product, all that business side. Then there is an engineering vertical, which actually is like the engine of the car, which makes the product, right, and makes it better, right? And then the third is the operations. Operations actually make sure are like wheels of the car, where they run the product, right? That includes sales, that includes marketing, right? So I think where I belong in Facebook is the third spectrum, which is called operations, right? And my job is like whenever we have these new releases for all the Facebook owned products, right? So Facebook is beyond like the Facebook app. It's like Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, uh, like Facebook Blue app, right? Whenever these features get launched, it comes down to our team to ensure that we have data sensitivity, we have integrity issues are not handled there. Nobody can abuse our systems to do malfunctions on or malpractices on Instagram and Facebook. They still happen, right? But how do we prevent them? So I think like operations is where I belong. So my day-to-day life or day-to-day job basically entails ensuring which product releases are we handling in upcoming months, and how are we ready to prepare for it, right? All of a sudden, if we have people who start committing fraudulent activities, how do we handle that, right, with this new product release? So or what if we have like a data privacy issue, how do we handle it? So managing those launches is like a key part of my day-to-day activity. The other thing that is also a part of my day-to-day role here is building those cross-functional relationships. So as you can imagine, right, like when you're wheels, you have to work with the entire car to run forward, right? So similarly, like when you're in operations, you have to work with the product team, you have to work with the engineering team to make sure that your operations are green or your operations are running smoothly. So a lot of my time is invested in working with these WhatsApp product teams or Instagram product teams and kind of gathering information on what does success look like for them and how do you ensure that those are working correctly. So that's like a lot of my part. And the last part is basically uh, optimizations and efficiencies, right? So like you can scale faster. Like there are like 1 billion people who use a product, right? So how do you ensure that the people have the best experience and it does not break, like as more people adopt to our platforms. So you have to refine your operations. You have to make that more efficient, so that you do not also invest a lot of money into it. So that is where I spend like the other significant part of my time as well to build those efficiencies in the processes and make sure those processes are running smoothly even as we scale. So yeah, hopefully that gives you some insight.
Yes, sir.
That was really insightful, sir. So, sir, since you shared your interest in learning as well as teaching, so can you share the kinds of books or articles you prefer to read and how they had an impact in your life?
Yeah, so I like most of the things I read is online, right? Now, I there was a time where I used to read books, but I no longer. But so like most of the things is like there is like something that's called HBR, which is Harvard Business Review, which has some amazing articles. I also briefly mentioned Medium. Medium also has like I follow like bunch of people on Medium, and they write amazing articles as well. So I think that is something that I have learned. One thing that I recently, which I wanted to share, and I think might be applicable for all of you here, is that I learned about how to prioritize. Right? You realize like when you get into your job, like and as you grow into your job, right, and like get into certain level of seniority, you will realize that a lot of people come to you for a lot of things. Now you don't have time. As I said, you'll probably be constantly in meetings, and you'll be constantly like meeting these people and working for them, where you will not have time for your own work. So how do you prioritize what is coming in and what is right for you and the company? So one I like a lot of times, I used to focus on activities. Activities is like a checklist, right? That I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, or you could say I did this, I did this, I did this. It's like a task list or a checklist, but it's not an outcome. And an outcome is something where it is a bunch of these activities which actually then move or do some significant impact to actual business or actual company, right? So I did not understand how to differentiate between an activity and an outcome, and how to prioritize an outcome instead of an activity. And I read this great article, and to be honest, I don't remember the author's name, but like I read this great article on Medium, and I realized like how critical it is to focus on outcomes. So that's how I'm trying to change now, where like if people come to me, if multiple product teams come to me and my team say, hey, we need your help to launch this product, and by this time, then now it becomes a question that I ask them, like, what is the outcome that we are trying to drive? Why do we want to launch this new API or this SDK, or this version of SDK, and how is it going to help our end user experience, right? So I think that was a great learning for me specifically, and yeah, just wanted to kind of share that with you guys.
It was great to hear about your learnings, sir. Now, summing up everything, would you like to share any final words of advice for all of us?
No, I think like I would just say enjoy. You guys are having this and listening to me like on a Friday evening probably is incredible. I'm glad that you're probably missing on your dinner or something nice and fancy. So this is definitely a right thing. If you've heard me so far, thank you so much. I think I would like when I was in college, people would say this. Even my dad and mom would say like, "Okay, enjoy your college life. You'll never get this life again." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, okay, that makes sense." But I never actually understood the meaning until very recently when I'm no longer in college, right? So I think I would highly encourage all of you to like have fun, make memories, and invest in building relationships, because I think relationships and connections that you build with one another through CSI, or through your classroom interactions, or through a sport, or through whatever it is, right? I think those connections and relationships would take you forward. I'm still in close contact with a lot of people who I worked when I was in CSI. I don't know if you guys still have Claro Technico, but we used to organize an event called Claro Technico, and a lot of people used to participate in it. And I'm still in connection with those people, and it's still so much fun when we look back and think of those days. So I would just build and focus on building relationships, which will take you higher and farther.
Thank you, sir. So this comes to the end of our today's session. And if you guys have any doubts, you can do ask them in the chat section, or also you can unmute yourself. So, sir, we have some doubts in the chat section. Let me read it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so Urjit Mehta says, what's the difference between a leader and a manager when it comes to a project, event, and any sort of work? When we are placed, chosen at some high authorized place, where we have to organize, manage the work with other people who are also having great leadership background, but they are under us.
Right. I think like that's a great question. Thank you for sharing that, Urjit. I think one thing that I want to clarify here is that there is a difference between it might get confusing in English, but if you look at it in Gujarati, it's even simple, right? There's a difference between one who is accountable and one who is responsible, right? So when I use those two words because I want to kind of differentiate between a leader and a manager, right? So a leader is somebody who is responsible, right? If there is an event or if there is a project or if there is like any sort of work, a leader is somebody who takes that responsibility and drives that event or drives the project forward, right? And the manager is one who's accountable. So as a leader, you might not be asked the question if you fail, right? Because you did your job, you did your leadership, you're driving the project forward. But a manager is someone who's accountable. Like if something fails, if something goes wrong, if somebody has a bad experience, if somebody complains, it will be like manager's headache to deal with it, right? And that is why managers are accountable to ensure success, right? And that's why I kind of brought up that point that when you become a manager, it is your job to ensure that every person in your team is feeling empowered, successful, and has no problems or no roadblocks. Because if they have a roadblock or a problem, then it is your job to solve it for them. So that's the delta. I hope that clarifies a little. But as I said again, I said earlier, leadership is something where you exert influence without power, and that, in my opinion, is very powerful because that shows your strength.
Uh, Thank you, sir. So, Urjit Mehta has also one more doubt that when a project job is not done appropriately due to some developer, tester, who is under you, and as a manager, you are the person who is spotted for the mistake. So, how to balance the situation when you have to answer the question to the higher priorities?
So I think like what I love to hear from Urjit like what he means by when you have to answer the question with the higher priorities. I think what he probably means is like higher authorities.
Authorities,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think one thing is you have to take the blame. You have to take the fault, right? If somebody does not do well under you, then before the results come out, you should have known, right? So say I'll again take Deep as an example, and sorry Deep for you being my example for a lot of examples. So let's say Deep is my manager, right? And I'm not doing well, right? Ideally, Deep and I should be having one-on-one conversations every week, and Deep should know that I'm not comfortable in this problem that has been given to me, right? So let's take a specific example that I have been asked to code like an online shopping module, right? And I don't know how to code, right? And I just got the job because I did some hacky thing and I got the job. Now, ideally, Deep should have known, like while working with me, reviewing my diffs or review my code, right? That okay, Udit is not comfortable with this or he's not doing his job well, and he shouldn't be waiting till like say 6 months or performance cycles to actually find out that I've not done a good job. Because as a manager, it is his job to ensure that I am set for success. Correct? Now, assuming that he did not realize till 6 months, and then after 6 months, his manager, who in this case is Janki, so Janki asked Deep, like, why is Udit not delivering his part of code? Like, what is the problem? And then it becomes important for Deep to take that accountability that, yeah, I'm sorry, I was not able to work with Udit to ensure that he and the team are able to deliver this because of blah 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 blah, right? So I think it is important for a manager to ensure that he or she takes accountability, as I said earlier, right? And kind of works with the team, not at the last minute, but on a more regular basis to ensure where the gaps are and how we can fill those gaps to make the entire experience for their direct reports better.
Okay. So Khush Manwar is asking that can you share some what is the most difficult part of being a leader and what are the challenges that you face?
Yeah, is ambiguity. Ambiguity is like uncertainty, right? You don't know. You're just told that do this, and then it becomes like you're on the sea, like Christopher Columbus, trying to find America, but you don't know which direction to go, right? And then if you go in the wrong direction, it means that you're taking the entire ship with you in the wrong direction, and then if you fail, it becomes your problem, right? That you failed because you went in the wrong direction. So I think that is the biggest challenge, and that is why you need to have like a strong crew of ship members who are there to support you when the direction is wrong or there are winds in way or there is a storm and your like ship is trembling. And that's why it is very important thing as a manager or as a leader to have right team, right set of people with you to kind of support you, right? And that is why, again, investing in relationships is very very key, very important with your peers, with your direct reports, even with your seniors, right? So I think one thing that is the most difficult part, being accountable when you also don't know where I should go, and how you should kind of move forward, and then figuring it out, right? Your job, because you are at this position where you can see things, right? It is your job to clear way for people to move forward, and kind of ensure success. So I think that, in my opinion, is the most difficult part.
Okay, sir. So guys, if you have any more doubts, then you can ask or also unmute yourself.
I see like
Urjit is asking, but sir, it will take time as we have to deliver the product to the customer. So is it good to give time to the person who is not doing fast or giving his job on time?
yes, absolutely. And I think that's a great point, right? Like you don't. It was just an example, but if in this case, let's take another same example, right? Like if Deep is noticing that I'm not able to do a good job, right? There are two ways Deep could solve that for me. One, he could say, okay, instead of like an entire online shopping module, how about you just do a particular function which feeds into this module, or create a reusable library which could be used by, say, uh, two other people, right? So like again, what is he doing here is trying to reduce the scope or trying to reduce the complexity. Right? The second thing Deep could do is say, okay, hey Udit, you have a problem, meet Urjit. Urjit is here in this company for 5 years. He could be a good onboarding mentor or a buddy for you. And then I work with Urjit to make sure that I understand the code base, I understand the complexity, and then kind of build my model that way. And the third thing is what you suggested, where he, in this case, Deep, will go to Janki and say, okay, my entire team is very new, or maybe Udit is very new, but he has this potential. I see him doing this. We'll need to extend our timelines, right? We'll need to deliver this instead of like 1 month or 6 months. We'll do it like at the end of eighth month. And this is the impact of it, right? He cannot just go to Janki and say, okay, I need more 2 months, right? He'll have to tell why he needs 2 months, and like what is an impact of that. It could be that you're trying to launch this particular a website or an app during Diwali, because that's where most people use this app and you want more business, right, during Diwali. And then if you delay by two months, then Janki would say, no, that's not going to happen. Our launch is fixed. So what I'll do is, instead of just Udit, I'll have Udit and Urjit both working on this, right? So again, that becomes something that Janki has to decide as Deep's manager, that what is the time to release or what is the time to market and why is it important, right? Because that will be a perspective that she would have, and both you and you as an Urjit and myself would not have. So that is why managing relationships with your direct reports on a daily basis is helpful. So if Deep can go to Janki early and say that, okay, we need to push our deadline, then that gives Janki enough time to assess what to do. So that's why it's important for a manager or leader to not wait for the end, but like constantly review and feedback and coach their direct reports.
Yes, sir. And Namsuk has asking, what is the difference in the role of product versus program versus project manager?
Yeah, I think that's an amazing, amazing question. So thank you for that question, Namsuk. There's a big difference, right? Product is like head, right? So a head is something that thinks and sets the vision, sets the direction. So product is like Steve Jobs, who says, "This is what I want my product to look like," or Mark Zuckerberg, who says, "This is what I want Facebook to be," right? Or like somebody who is trying to monetize a product, right? Like if I sell this in App Store and I'm going to charge like 9 rupees per download, then this is how I'm going to make money, right? So product is about direction setting, thinking forward, users, customers, how will they use, who will use, when will they use, so on and so forth, right? Now that's one thing. But then the one who makes and runs and executes and monitors the product is where program and project managers come in, right? Now there's a difference between project and program because all of them are at execution level, right? So if you look at the levels, right, product is at a strategy level or vision setting. A program and project are at an execution level. But the difference between project and program is a project looks at one release. A project looks at one kind of products, right? Or one project, right? So say you have a simple project in say your computer science class, right? That's and you're managing that project, that's project manager. But now if you are managing a team who is also managing projects in computer science and electronics and your mechanical project where you have like an array of projects, right? That's where program comes into place. And why is that critical? Because you want to ensure that there is synergies between all these three programs or all these three projects, right? You want to ensure that the dependencies between all these three projects are taken care of. You want to ensure that the reporting or how you communicate the progress to your leadership for all the three programs is uniform and streamlined in a manner that is effective for leadership to make a decision. So that is why you have program managers and you have project managers. And then program managers, in most of the cases, work with product to define a strategy on what and when and how will a product release, right? So that's how, of course, there's an intersection between all the three roles in different spaces, but there is a clear demarcation. But hopefully that answers your question now. So
Urjit has a question that how to keep a team motivated when we are at a great position.
when you say great position means like when you're a manager or leader or something like that.
Uh,
Okay, cool. Yeah. So
yes.
I think like one way to do is like as I mentioned earlier is to get involved, right? Nobody will ever listen to you if Deep as a president of CSI will say, "Hey, do this." But if Deep does it, then people will listen because people then know that this guy not only talks but also does, right? So being a doer is going to take you far, right? But just a talker is not going to take you far. So that's one way of keeping team motivated. Second is to understand what motivates you, right? For me, for an example, money could be motivation. For Deep, for an example, it could be like creating this cool AI technology or machine learning model could be something that motivates him. For Janki, it could be like just a product release and ensuring that customers are able to use it and like her own mother or father or family member or relative can use the product that she has made. So the sense of reward or motivation could be different for all three of us. So as a leader or manager, to understand what motivates your team is very important. So for an example, you are in a team or you're leading a team where all of us are motivated by money. So then how do you know that your conversation should be around the fact that, okay, let's launch this product, and if we launch this product correctly and we meet this year over year revenue, the probability of all of us getting promoted is going to be high, right? Of course, you don't want to lie to your team members, you want to make sure that that happens, but you want to motivate them in a manner that works for them. So knowing that is very critical, and that will probably keep your team motivated.
Uh, okay, guys. So if any more doubts, then you can still ask in the chat section. I guess that's all for the doubt session. So here we come to the end of today's session. I, on behalf of the entire CSI team, spread my most sincere thanks to the Udit sir who agreed to a session and gave us his valuable time from his busy schedule to grace this meeting and share his knowledge and experiences. Further, a big thank to Professor Siddharth sir for providing us the required support, guidance, and mentorship. Last but not the least, I would like to extend my gratitude to all the attendees of today's session. So we hope that you gained some knowledge from the today's session. We would like to end this with a small request to fill up the feedback form and help us to improve in the future. The link of the same is provided in the chat box. Also, you can follow us on the Instagram handle CSI_DDU and as well as on the Medium to stay tuned for the upcoming session and for the latest update. So here we officially end the third episode of our series Achievers on the Line, and similar episodes will be continued throughout the month. So stay tuned and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Deep and Janki. Thank you so much, everybody, and good luck for your respective careers. Know that you're not alone, right? And DDIT is just an amazing beginning to an even more amazing careers all of you will have. So have a great rest of your day and have fun.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
sir.
much, sir. We are
Bye
really
bye.
grateful for your time. Thank
No worries. Thank you. Bye bye.
you.
Bye.